Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April edition of this webinar series on responsible AI, an in-depth webinar series about the responsible design, development, application, and use of AI. In this series, we will discuss a range of topics related to the ethical, accountable, and sustainable use of AI. By doing so, we want to inform anyone with an interest in responsible AI about tools, methods, best practices, and lessons learned. By sharing the knowledge, we hope to aid you in the achievement of positive societal and environmental impact while meeting commercial or governmental business objectives. Today, we kick off with presentations by Chris Detweiler and Stan Guldemond. My name is Marieke Peters, and I am your host for today. I have a background in user-centered design of artificial intelligence, which over time converged into many of the topics nowadays commonly perceived as part of responsible AI. Examples are design for explainability, interpretability, accountability, and acceptability. After 10 years of applied research in academia and at DNO, I moved into business about a year ago, joining Xomnia as an analytics translator, aiming to bridge the gap between academic and applied research and the application domains, businesses, companies, and governmental organizations working on the adoption of data and AI. Today we have two speakers. The first one is Christian Detweiler. I will introduce him in a minute, but first let me ask you to already add your questions in the chat or in the comments on LinkedIn or on YouTube during the talks, because we have a slight delay of about 20 seconds of our broadcast. So if you already have some questions during the talk, please enter them in the chat or in the comments. So that we can continue our Q&A with the first questions that have been asked. So Christian Detweiler has been head of the Philosophy and Professional Practice Research Group since May 2020. He is also a senior lecturer in the User Experience Design program he helped set up at the Faculty of IT and Design. Before coming to the Hague University of Applied Sciences, he worked as a social designer and a researcher. He obtained his PhD on accounting for values in design in the Department of Values, Technology and Innovation and the Interactive Intelligence Group, both at Delft University of Technology. He has a master's in media technology from Leiden University and a bachelor's in media studies from the University of Amsterdam. Christian, thank you for being here, and I'm really looking forward to your talk.
Thanks, Marieke. Thanks for the introduction, Marieke, and thanks for the invitation as well. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. Today, I'd like to talk to you about some subtle, big issues in ethics and technology. These are issues, or the issues I want to point out today are issues that are subtle enough to be overlooked often when we're doing design or when we're using products, but that are significant enough to discuss. And what I'd like to do with this talk is to raise awareness of some of these issues. Now, when we think of issues in ethics and technology, we often think of scandals and large-scale harms. Things like Cambridge Analytica and how it might have affected elections, how it might have affected Facebook users' privacy, the Therac 25 case where software errors led to radiation therapy overdoses, racist Twitter bots like Tay, Microsoft's Twitter bot that had to be taken offline, whether self-driving cars should choose to save the passengers or some dogs crossing the streets, etc. So sort of big issues, big harms, scandals, etc. But the issues that I want to talk about today are a class of issues that are not so obviously harmful or scandalous, and that's precisely due because of the air of neutrality that a lot of these products have. These are issues that are very subtle. Sometimes they're ambiguous issues, but added up, these little issues can have significant impacts. To examine these impacts, I'd like to look at workplace analytics, or a specific product in workplace analytics. And my aim here is not to bash the product or to ridicule it in any way, but I think that the case, and by looking in detail at this case, we can get some insight into some interesting issues that are often overlooked. And interesting issues about neutral looking products. Ideally, we'd, in sort of a smaller setting with more time, we'd go through this interface in detail together, and wouldn't leave any button unclicked or any tooltip unread. But in this case, time is limited, and I hope you'll forgive me for cherry picking examples to build my argument. Now, My Analytics is a Microsoft product that was launched as part of Office 365 back in 2016. And the idea with Microsoft My Analytics was that it would give users insight into how much time they spent in emails, how much time they spent in meetings, how much time they spent not working in Microsoft products at least, and how much time they spent being productive. I'm assuming, I don't know enough about the history of the product, but that this was a somewhat opportunistic product in that they had data from Office 365, things like, how often you email and with whom, and, self-tracking was popular at the time, and probably still is. And, you can combine the two, give people workplace insights to help them to be more productive. Fast forward 5 years, and this is what My Analytics looks like now, which, in a time when we're spending most of our time, at least I am, being in Microsoft products all day, they're probably collecting a lot more data on, work patterns that they can give me insights into, give users insights into in the new version of My Analytics. It offers 4 categories of work patterns, 4 categories of insights. One of them is focus, which is about whether or not you have enough time to do uninterrupted work. Well-being, which is about disconnecting from work. Network, which is about managing your network and growing your network. And collaboration, which is about how you spend your time on emails and in meetings. If you click on these various elements of the interface, you get into sort of tips and suggestions on how to improve your work practice, and the possibility of starting certain interventions, like having Microsoft set aside a certain time for you in your Outlook calendar to be productive, for instance. I'll get into those in a little more detail now in discussing some issues with My Analytics. So one of the main categories of issues I want to look at are the assumptions made in an interface like this and the interpretations of data made. So in My Analytics, the whole well-being category gives insight into when you interacted with Office 365 products outside of the working hours you set. So if I check my email after 5 o'clock today, it's going to be registered there as time that wasn't quiet time. The assumption here is that the source of well-being, lies outside of work itself. So well-being is the same thing as quiet days, and that is basically not working. So quiet days are not time spent working, and they contribute to my well-being. And basically what the product says here, if you click through to certain parts of it, is that people who disconnect daily from work report lower levels of stress and anxiety. So if you don't work after 5, you're going to be in a better place. Another category of assumptions and interpretations is the collaboration category, or focus category, sorry. And the focus category is defined as not interacting with other people. So within My Analytics, on the one hand, your time will be checking emails and meeting with people. That goes into the collaboration category, and focus time goes into not interacting with other people. The interesting thing to ask here is, is focus always an individual thing? Does focus mean I'm not collaborating with other people? Could we not, as a group, be focused if we're coming up with new ideas for a new product and are absorbed in the process together? And the other question is, do you really focus when you're spending time alone, or do you spend it checking Facebook or something? Another category important to my analytics is collaboration. And in this category, you get insights on how you're spending your time emailing, how you're spending your time in meetings, are you multitasking during meetings, etc. And what it asks here is, are you spending your meeting time or your time working with other people being productive, or could you spend that time being more productive? What they say is that insights in this category matter because nearly half of all meetings are considered unproductive. And it asks whether you could spend this time with people being more productive. This kind of assumes that meeting with other people is all about being productive, and that in a sense, meeting with other people is kind of unproductive because focus time is when you do your real work, and meeting with others sort of isn't real work. So maybe you should try to limit that. Of course, there are other views of what it means to meet with other people and what value you could get from that other than being productive. This kind of brings me to the third assumption here, that well-being isn't the same thing as collaboration, isn't the same thing as focus. So within my analytics, these are mutually exclusive categories. My work time is divided into collaboration and focus, and everything outside of that is well-being. And if I spend time doing one of the other things in any of those times, it's detracting from the other things. So it's all mutually exclusive. Another category of assumptions within my analytics is the network. And it's interesting to note the question that the interface poses here, namely, are you growing your network? Now, if you look at the tips there as well, within the networking category, it kind of portrays your colleagues as resources. Building internal networks helps you connect to new ideas and resources. Make sure you spend time with people that align with your productivity goals, and etc. Which, sure, it's important to network with the right people in a lot of jobs, but equally important potentially is maybe having friendships or supportive relationships at work. Venting, sharing some personal issues, things to help you get through the day. I'll get into that a little more in a minute. So these are all assumptions and interpretations that the interface and the product is making. Sometimes it also goes a step further. It's not just this sort of neutral dashboard, but it includes all sorts of modules that suggest you do certain activities in certain directions, or even help you intervene in your calendar. So it includes a module that claims focus time in your schedule, for instance, which you can see at the lower left of the screen. That's from my calendar. Apparently, I needed to plan some focus time. Little elements like, not breaking the chain. So you see that 6 out of 10 days, I've booked focus time. There's sort of a nudge there to book more focus time. So, and in addition to this, there's this whole program of habit building. So if you delve into the documentation behind my analytics, you'll find all sorts of tips on how to use the product to build healthier work habits. So what I want to show with these examples is that it's not just a dashboard that's, in a sense neutral, but it's actually trying to encourage certain forms of activity based on those data. Which brings me to a number of intermediate conclusions that I'd like to draw. And these are by no means exhaustive conclusions, but they are some things that if you look at this interface in detail, you start to notice about the way they're positioning things. Now, one of those conclusions is that work within my analytics, within this workplace analytics product, is defined in terms of productivity and efficiency. So everything's about using your time productively, using it efficiently. Don't be in meetings that aren't worth everyone's time. Ideally, don't spend too much time meeting with other people, because that's taking away from your productive time in which you actually get things done, your focus time. But there are other views of what work actually is, what the goods of work actually are. Things like excellence, community, having a sense of social contribution and gaining a sense of meaning from that, and having a sense of social recognition. These are all values that, given that we fill a lot of our time with working, we often don't have time to fulfill outside of work. So researchers like Gauss and Herzog argue that it's actually important and a matter of justice that these are addressed within work itself, and not left to those quiet days that my analytics says are important for my well-being. So well-being is also something that happens within work. Related to that, this whole product, in a sense, by giving you these data based on which you can optimize your work patterns, is sort of framing well-being as a matter of personal responsibility. Now, you could also ask yourself whether the same analytics could be used in aggregate, anonymized form or something like that, to notify managers, for instance, that the workload is too extreme, or that people on the work floor need more time for reflection, or more time to more focus time. These could be workplace values that we try to enact and prioritize together, rather than making it the responsibility of the individual employee. Another thing I touched on earlier is the notion that colleagues are resources, and that colleagues, within this framework, colleagues aren't friends. Colleagues aren't, people you're happy to see, or any other framing of colleagues. They're resources. You get ideas from them, and they might connect you to other resources. But again, this is sort of a narrow interpretation of what your network actually is. Related to this, or sort of building on this, is something that Marjolein Lansing has analyzed in the context of sort of quantified self-tools for health, and that's the issue of decisional interference. So what a product like this is doing is it's gathering data on our decisions, and feeding that back to us in order to nudge us into other forms of decisions. So basically, my analytics is trying to get me, in a sense, even though I opt in and all that, to choose more productive, healthier work patterns. Of course, these are specific kinds of decisions. Like I said earlier, specific framings of productivity, efficiency, there's specific priorities built into this, specific understandings of well-being. And based on these understandings, I'm getting a dashboard. And based on these assumptions and interpretations, I'm getting a dashboard based on which I take decisions about my workplace patterns, my work patterns. But we can ask ourselves whether it's desirable that a company from Redmond is influencing our decision-making with regard to how we do work, and how we sort of structure our work practices. And this, of course, is an issue of autonomy as well. If this dashboard is interfering in my decision-making, in a sense, or influencing my decision-making, in a sense, with specific interpretations of data, then it's also affecting my autonomy as an employee. So one takeaway here is that, here's a workplace analytics product. it's presenting itself as a neutral dashboard based on which you can optimize your own practices. But the view on work that's embedded or inscribed in that product is one particular view of work. It's not a universal view of work. It's not necessarily a view of work I share, and maybe not one that many of you share. And most of all, it's not neutral. And that's important to realize when we're building tools like this, and when we're using tools like this, is that even though they seem neutral, they're inhabiting a specific position within a space of all possible positions. And we can ask ourselves whether we agree with that, whether our users agree with that, and whether it's in their best interest. And with that, I'd like to open up the floor to questions, if that's the setup here. In any case, give the floor back to Marieke.
Thank you, Christian. That was a really interesting talk. And I really like how you stepped through each and every one of the frames of this tool and really gave a more interpretation of what is the reasoning behind these design choices and what do they imply for the user, and especially your conclusions regarding this one way of viewing the workplace and what work ought to be is really interesting, and becomes it's very convincing. I think that it's obviously one way of looking at it. Let me see whether there are any questions from the audience. So there's one question asking you whether it would be legitimate to take the quality of the social networks into account as an additional metric.
So the social networks, I'm assuming that means what my analytics is analyzing when it presents your network to you. Yeah, so there's I can't really go back a few slides now, but it's not that important. My analytics has wow. Okay, so right here, down below, you can see sort of this map view of your network, and what it's presenting here is how long I'm interacting with all these different people. So I think they're closer to me if I spend more time interacting with them. One thing I should mention here, I'm in education, so like it's understanding what a network means and even what collaboration means is very skewed to maybe sales or something like that. For me, collaboration time is the core of my work, in the sense that, I have to collaborate by having calls with people. Now that education is online, that's how we teach. With regards to the quality of the network, it depends on what you mean by quality. Microsoft here has interpreted it as amount of time spent interacting with people, and it infers from that those must be important people. And you do have some agency there in that you can select people as important, but what does important mean? Are these good friends, or are these, is this your boss? Is this someone who keeps pestering you with tedious questions? It's all flattened into this one category of important. I think it would be legitimate to maybe take the quality of the social network into account in that sense, but as long as you have a say in what quality means there. I think the whole problem here is that one definition of quality gets built into the product when many more interpretations are possible and maybe desirable. I hope that answers the question.
I think it would. I would be happy with this answer. I don't know about the LinkedIn user; he was anonymous. So there's a follow-up question that I think relates to the point that you were making. Like, what could Microsoft do to make this tool better, or more neutral, or more ethical? So yeah, it kind of touches upon this one quality of work that you just mentioned.
Okay, so regarding neutrality, nothing. And I think it's an illusion to think that you can make a neutral product. Now, what I hope to make clear with this talk, but I'll reiterate now, is that when you're making any product, you're making a specific configuration of technology and not other configurations. So, no matter how many data you throw at it, no matter how fine-grained you make the categories in there or how user-defined, you're still offering a specific configuration and not other possible configurations. So let's do away with the idea that we can even hope to be neutral with these products, but let's embrace the non-neutrality in the sense that we say, well, this is our position in this product, and let's look more carefully at that, and consider what it means that this product isn't neutral. And with that as a starting point, then be open about where we stand, because I don't think these things are neutral. There's a really interesting paper. I don't have an adequate way of sharing that right now, but it's by Johan Redström. I don't know where he is now. He wrote it in 2006, and it's called Persuasion on the Fringes or something like that. And in that, basically what he says is that technologies are persuasive arguments in material form. So whenever you design something, you're saying, this is the way the world should be in a certain sense. With Microsoft, My Analytics, Microsoft in a sense is saying, for people who use Office 365, the world should be a place where they can analyze their interactions with other people, blah, 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 blah. That's taking a specific position, and you can't avoid that. In terms of making it more ethical, I think a starting point, again, is saying, well, this is our position, and thinking, sort of reflecting as a developer on why or why not you agree with that position that you're putting forward through that technology. And then you can get into ethical frameworks and all that, but I think a starting point is acknowledging that it's not neutral. I hope that answers the question.
So I have a question of my own that kind of follows up on this topic of putting in the time to reflect and really think about your position and what that means for your design. Because what I see around me most of the time is that within organizations, it's often depending on that one person who has this personal hobby or interest or intrinsic motivation to kind of make this visible or to work towards more ethical design, or really think through, okay, what impact will our design choices have for our stakeholders. And so it kind of prevents companies to see it as something that they should really invest time and resources in. That's not really common at the moment, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, please, audience. So this is creating sort of a gap, I think, between what we're doing within academic research, applied research, and also the very valuable talk that you just gave. And I feel like it has also a link to the content of your platform that you just analyzed, because that was really about being productive and having all these, super efficient meetings and squeezing every juice of productiveness out of your day. So where is the room to do this reflection? And how can you add that to a working dashboard, right? So how do you think about that? Is that also your impression?
I think that's a really valuable thought there, and a few things come to mind. So on the one hand, in terms of making time, what I think is interesting, I don't know if they're still doing it, but Google used to have this 20% thing where you take a day a week to work on whatever you can dream up. I forget which great products came from that, but they gave their employees time to time for innovation. Now, if we agree in sort of a non cynical or instrumental way that ethics is important, or if certain people within an organization agree that on that, or we as a field or whatever, why not make time for that if it's going to make things better, in the same way that we were making time for innovation. You know, ethics doesn't have to necessarily stifle innovation. I think ethics and innovation, I mean, you know, responsible innovation can go hand in hand. Another thing that comes to mind is that, you know, usability and user-centeredness also used to be something that was sort of outside computing technology. It was all about functionality. Well, I guess command line interfaces fit some definition of usability, but you know, later on we see ergonomics and usability, user-centeredness coming to the field, and by now it's something that users have come to expect. If something looks like a website from the 1990s, chances are, if it's not being ironic in some way, that it's going to lose users. You know, people have come to expect this, and companies have UX departments, etc. accordingly. I think the same thing could happen with ethical considerations. I don't think, you know, right now it still might seem like a hobby thing, but I don't think it's impossible for it to become more mainstream the same way UX did and usability did.
Thank you. That's a very hopeful promise. So I think this is also a great link to our second speaker, because Stan is actually working at the City of Amsterdam, and there they do get time to reflect on the choices that they make when developing their products. So Frits, if you could, yes, thank you. You read my mind. I just have to switch to my notes to introduce Stan. So Stan Guldemond is our second speaker of today, and he is a software developer at the City of Amsterdam and the lead developer for the Object Detection Kit. Stan works on the development of human-centric tools with a data-driven approach. His main focus is supporting the maintenance of the public space in Amsterdam, and he strives to create solutions with the user in sight and open and shared web in mind. He does so while supporting and taking part in sustainable communities with a focus on living in balance with nature, each other, and ourselves. Stan, I'm looking forward to your talk.
Thank you, Marike. So, related to the subject today, ethics in data science projects, I want to talk a bit about, I'm just going to start a timer here on the left side because I don't see my time. Yeah. The ethics in a public computer vision project. So with the subtitle here is why and how the City of Amsterdam develops their own computer vision software. To begin with, object detection kits. Just to make a little sketch of how this started and specific application of computer vision. You see here a few cases of what we call in Dutch bijplaatsing, or at least in the city, misplaced garbage. So this is an underground container, and there are different objects next to it, onto it. Some of them should be in there, some of them shouldn't be there at all. And the question is, or the question was, how can we clean this up better? Well, one of the things we work on is object detection, so a bit of computer vision. I have a little video here where you can see that we developed a little app where a driver can log in. This is a test setup, so I'm not actually a driver, but the driver would log in, get some instructions, and we'll need to share their GPS location and share their camera. And that way, well, this is of course an example. They can start scanning the streets. There's a few features built into this app. For example, when the car is standing still, there are no frames collected. But We can adjust that real quick. And then when you start scanning, it will start counting objects. So here it sees, for example, 36 garbage bags, and then it will go down. Well, what does this look like in practice? So I really like this little animation that our designer made a long time ago. It's the happy flow where one car drives around in his normal routes. He sees some garbage, and the right department is notified, picks up the garbage bag, and it looks like something like this. This scanning process, so it will detect different kind of objects, and what it results into is something that we also developed. Is something like this. It's a dashboard where we can see all the detected objects. For example, this is a scan which happened on the last day that we actually did a scan in our proof of concept, which is the 10th of December 2020. And here you can see a part of Amsterdam. And for example, you can click here and you can see that on this location, at this garbage location, we have one trash bag scanned and 2 pieces of furniture. Let me just go back to my presentation. So the question is, why develop this ourselves? And then we get to the ethics part. So of course, there are many providers of object detection. I just put down a few here, which are Google, Microsoft, and Bosch. And I didn't put them down just because they are familiar names, but actually these are companies that contacted us. So we got actively contacted by Google, who are also really want to get into the government space to provide computer vision solutions. At the same time, we are currently working within the city with the Azure environment, and also often enough, people from Microsoft would like us to use their products. And I also received an email that also Bosch was also working on some computer vision technologies that they wanted to sell to the gemeente. So there's definitely a lot of interest from companies to sell this technology to cities and local governments. But why develop this ourselves? And I have a few categories why we do this. One of them is accountability. So what happens to the data? It's of course an important question. It's fun to send one image to, or like a few images to Google or to Microsoft, but actually you're actually sending it to a black box. You don't really know what's happening on the other side. You probably agree to some terms, what they can do with all the with the pictures that you send, with all the data that they extract from it. So in order to be responsible, to be accountable to citizens, and to be accountable for where the public money is going, it is interesting to develop this ourselves. And of course, it is an interesting idea to be able to communicate to the citizens of a city. What does the city see? What does the city recognize? Of course, you probably know these cars driving around, or small motorcycles with a big camera on top. But how are we checking what they actually see? So I think Amsterdam does have has a website up with some information about parking control and some other AI projects which you can check out to see what actually happens on the background. But I think we can even take this a step further. Well, another reason to do this ourselves is reusability. There's a little bit of joke from Microsoft loves open source. Well, City of Amsterdam also loves open source. The city has a lot of resources to develop these things. So what's interesting is that if we develop it, we can also make it public, and smaller municipalities with less budget can use our software instead of having to go to the big providers, the external providers. Then you can say quality. Of course, external providers are probably, like, most likely, no, they are way ahead on quality. But with what we have developed now, with the current tech we have, with the current object detection we have, we can already solve a lot of issues, or we can already answer a lot of questions within the city. So I have a little video. This is actually a really old one. We are already way further than this, but you can see it's quite good at recognizing all these different objects. And of course, we are continuously developing it. We're now saying object detection kit, but we're also looking at classification within computer vision. And the third reason is just pretty cool. It's pretty nice to be able to provide a service. And the most of the people who are working on this, they're actually in contract with the city, so they're civil servants, so that the knowledge stays within the city and it doesn't leak out through, like, external companies putting people in the city and, like, maybe selling this, selling that. So that's just pretty cool. Decisions during development. This is a slide I just added right at the end. So, but I added it to kind of showcase also, like, why develop this ourselves. And it's interesting for us to develop this product from end to end. So as you just saw, there's a little app, some videos are coming in, some picture stream, and also, like, it ends up on this dashboard. And we developed the entire pipeline ourselves. And these are some steps. They're not per se in chronological order, but first we prototype the technology. We pick up ideas. So the garbage department comes to us and says, hey, well, can you scan garbage bags? We extend the prototype. We talk to users. We present the data in a visual way. And through all these steps, you really get a good vision of what it actually means to implement computer vision or to implement object detection, like all the things that are necessary. For example, how are you going to scan those? How often are you going to scan the streets? And how do you know which areas to scan? And these are all questions coming up when you actually start implementing these prototypes. So that's quite interesting. There's some privacy things that we take into account. So we are saying that we're not releasing the frames that we shoot. We're just releasing the extracted data, so X amount of garbage bags, wooden pallets, that kind of stuff. But at the same time, in the background, we're working on, like, pretty good privacy blurs, so that we make sure that on all the frames that we capture, faces and license plates are blurred, so that at some point we can possibly provide the raw frames. Yeah, a big part of the ethics, it's really something that we, from the very, very beginning, decided, is that the whole project should have an open character. So, of course, like, scanning the streets is kind of scary, right? If you see on LinkedIn, I see sometimes comments of people seeing, like, a big brother is watching you. And I think that's why, especially as a government, it's very important to be very open about this stuff. So we actually started with a website. I can just go to that real quick. This is the website that we made. It's actually, like, you can visit it, of course. It's a bit out of date because it turns out it's a lot of work to get all these projects going and to keep them all up to date. But it's still pretty up to date. So this is really focused on the garbage use case. There's some real nice animations, of course. And one thing that we wanted to show is currently recognized objects, so that we really keep citizens and people up to date about what we are actually detecting on the streets. Yeah, it has some different pages. You can visit it on odk.ai. On the same website, we also added a contact form so people can contact us. And that way, Marieke contacted us. And well, that's why we're here. Another part is, of course, making the code public. Amsterdam already does make a lot of code public. And we putting our code public on GitLab. And if you go to GitLab, you won't see all of these because some of them are private. But for example, the entire ODK stack. So this is the app and the backends, and also what we call the frame analyzer. You can all find it here. You can clone the repository. You can try it out yourself. And another thing that we in the beginning worked on is like, how can we notify people? How can we notify people on the streets what a scan car is actually doing? So we worked on prototype these stickers. As an example, this car is scanning garbage. So that's part of the open character. Looking ahead a bit, so what are we working on now? Of course, the whole garbage use case is an example. And what we are working on, or like what we're envisioning, is actually to make a proper computer vision API, a la Azure, actually. Like I saw this thing from Azure, which I really liked. It's just a simple thing. You can upload an image. Let's upload an image here. Garbage, for example. And then you can see it detects a wheel or a bicycle here and there. So I think that would be really cool as like a public-facing element of the computer vision API, so that anyone can just see like what does the city see, and with that also the trained models that we use to make like a public catalog of those. And what we can do is we can use that computer vision API for internal projects, but as well as external. So, for example, other municipalities. And what would be really cool eventually if we can publish it, for example, through VNG, the Association of Dutch Municipalities, so that we actually provide a service with an open source community, which can also improve the overall tech. Then I'm already kind of at the end of my talk. I have some links here, some more about the tech. If you want to follow what the city does, and if you want to see some nice videos that my colleague Maarten Sukel made, he's the AI lead at City of Amsterdam. You can find him on LinkedIn. Probably just go to LinkedIn and type in his name, Maarten Sukel. And here's a little bit of info about the stack for the ODK stack that we currently built. We use little Vue.js, JavaScript, a lot of Python, of course. We do some queuing. We actually use the YOLO v5 object detection, if people are familiar with that, and of course some SQL relational database. And currently we are building things like making sure that everything is scalable with Kubernetes. And we're also looking into if we can use the Azure machine learning environment. So actually go to GitLab or the website. On the website, you can also find a link to the GitLab if you are interested. That was it. Thank you. Let me go back.
Yes. Thank you, Fritz.
Yes.
So we already have a question by Bas Rapati. He asks, I understand why you would develop it yourself. This is a great use case. But are you in contact with other cities in the Netherlands to collaborate on this? And it would be a shame if every city would develop this by themselves.
Yeah, definitely. We've been talking with people from Rotterdam and Utrecht. They all have different use cases. So a while back, it was people are also very interested in littering. There are some really nice examples also from, it's a municipality not so far from Amsterdam. I forgot the name, but what they actually detected, they trained a model to detect mud on the streets. Or you can maybe see the quality of the road. So it's really also beyond object detection. Like maybe that's also why I call it computer vision, because you can also look beyond object counting, but also finding certain patterns based on images. Yeah.
Sort of like situation recognition or something like that.
Oh yeah, my colleague says it on the chat. It's Hollands Kroon who worked on this mud on the streets. Yeah. Yeah.
So related on that, I sometimes see that a garbage due to seagulls or wind has spread all the way through the street. Is that also something you're considering to take into account, like as a scenario for computer vision?
Yeah, so it, like, of course we would like to be, or the city would like to be more proactive. So what you can see now is that when it's dirty, people, or when, like, you know, there's a complaint, the people who clean the streets actually with the big brushes, they will fix that stuff. But the idea is to be more proactive and to be sure that before the seagull gets there, that we can already make sure that it's cleaned up. Because actually the seagull case is quite interesting, because a lot of different departments all of a sudden get involved. Like, it's the garbage, it's the cleaning. So you really want to be ahead of those.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I can imagine. Let me see. I also have a question for you, and I'm going to go to my notes. I'm kind of intrigued by how you've decided to take this development into your own hands. And so instead of, for instance, leaving it up to Bosch or Microsoft. And you mentioned it is a bit of a trade-off between, on the one hand, staying in control, and on the other hand, you also have the limited resources to really achieve the same quality as these big tech giants. So how do you aim to tackle this challenge in the long run, especially when there are more data solutions needed in addition to the object detection kit, or if the city starts working on different projects, so to say? How does this approach scale when you have multiple innovations to be developed all in-house?
Yeah, so right now, actually, the people who are really, there's now the AI team within the city, and it's really growing a lot. So I think what we're doing now really is investing in knowledge. So apart from if you're going to develop it yourself or you're going to buy something, it's really relevant to have the knowledge in-house. Because then when you want to buy something or when you want to add a certain product, it's really important to be able to know what they're doing, what they're offering. So that's one part. But I think about concerning scalability, like I said, with the limited quality that we can offer, or like limited towards external providers, we can already solve so many issues and or like answer so many questions. So before we really have to think about the quality is not good enough, the first concern is implementing those things, because it turns out it's quite hard to implement something as new as object detection in something that is the people from on the streets, they really do their work, like, you know, they're really used to the streets and they're really used to the way they're working. So a big part of it is also not breaking through that, but also finding a form to assist them to make that technology assist their work and not change their work. So I'm not so worried about the quality not being high enough and like falling behind. And when we really need stuff, then we can already buy it, but at least we know what we're buying. And I think that's a very big part, to know what you're stepping into. Yeah.
Thanks. Let me see. I have a few questions from the audience. So one is by Frank Groenewoud. Thank you, Stan. It wasn't clear to me whether there was an active citizen participation aspect to the project. Do you think that this would speed up detection? For instance, are people annoyed enough by stray trash so that they will use an app to let you know about this?
Yeah, I think we are very interested in active citizen participation. There's this guy, he's called the Zwervenator, and he really, he's outside of the city, and he's really already documented a lot of garbage on the street. So I know that Maarten, our AI lead, is often in contact with him, or at least has been in the past, and he really provides us with a lot of different images already of garbage on the streets, and this is already super valuable because it's to train these models. You read real life scenarios of what this garbage looks like on the street. But let's see, i.e., are people annoyed enough by stray trash so that they will use an app to let you know about it? Yeah, so that's like I don't really get the last part, because that's more like notifying the city about when there's trash. But I think there's lots that can happen around citizen participation. For example, if you have certain objects that we can ask citizens to annotate stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of space still for citizen participation.
Yeah, so that's actually also a question from the audience. Like, how did you label the data? And a follow-up question: do you have an estimation of the AU CPR of the model? But first of all, how did you label your data?
Yeah, I have to confess that I'm actually not an AI guy. I'm the software guy. So if you really have I don't know what an AU CPR, what the AU CPR is. I
think it's an accuracy measurement.
Yeah. So my colleague Maarten, he's really with his team. They're really providing us with the core detection, and what my team built around it is the app and the whole pipeline and the dashboard and that kind of stuff, and really connecting it to, in this case, garbage department, but we're also in contact with other departments. How did we label the data? There's a company that we can send pictures to, and now we're actually trying to improve a couple of categories. So, of course, what's important for us is underground and above ground containers, garbage bags, carton boxes, and things like fridges and that kind of stuff. But it's just an external party that labels that for us, because, yeah, you really need good data. You need, like trash in is trash out. So, yeah.
Yeah, which is ironic in this
yeah,
context.
that's okay.
An anonymous LinkedIn user asks, do you think this technology could or should be used to recognize people in order to perform crowd control? And I think this is a very nice question, because it really relates to one of the, tell it yourself.
Yeah, so we started with a website, and one of the things that we made is like an FAQ, and we very specifically said we're not going to, it's the object detection kit and it's not the person detection kit. So as a team, and personally, I'm trying to stay away from detecting people. The only thing that we do is we recognize faces in order to blur them, just as license plates. It could be used in order to perform crowd control, and actually the AI team has done that also. They did the 1,5 meter. I think you can find it actually on the LinkedIn of Maarten. And they made a little, well, it was quite cool actually. On big squares, there was a big screen, and there you could see if you were too close to other people. So it is possible, but I think we started without, I think it can work in the future, but in order to do that, we really need to be sure of our quality and be sure that we can have the system in place so that we have these privacy elements covered. And if you start with people, then it gets already really complicated. So we started with objects, and if you really are certain of your quality, then I think you should be possible to do these crowd control things in more production scenarios. Yeah.
Thank you. That was our last question, because I have a few announcements for the next few webinars. Thank you both, Stan and Christian. I think it was 2 very nice talks, and I hope the audience agrees. Let me see where my presentation is. Yes. Sorry, I'm lost in all my screens. And now looking for my notes. Oh. I want to put it on full screen. Yes. Sorry about this. So our upcoming Responsible AI webinars. In May, we have an edition that is specifically about AI risk assessment and management in high-risk applications. We have speaker Alexander Boer, who is a consultant at KPMG, and Mark Robov, who is General Manager for Digital Transformation in Aerospace and Defense at DXC Technology. And they will talk about different ways of assessing risk and managing it in, for instance, finance and aviation, so high-risk applications. In June, we have Hilde Weerts, who is an artificial intelligence engineer at TU Eindhoven, and Jasper van der Waa, who is a scientist at TNO and a PhD candidate at TU Delft. And they will talk about fair AI and explainable AI, respectively. In July, we plan to have a webinar about AI for good, and the speakers are soon to be announced. In August, we will have a summer recess because of holidays. And in September, I have this topic of cybersecurity, for which I have one possible speaker. But the speaker is more looking at it from a socio-cognitive perspective, so socio-technical systems perspective, sorry. So more about the people factor, the human factor in cybersecurity. And I'm still looking for a speaker who could complement that by saying something about the more technical side of cybersecurity and how to make it the most easy path for people with technology to be compliant with cybersecurity guidelines. Oftentimes, technology is kind of hindering us or making it extra complicated to be compliant with cybersecurity, but technology can also make it the easy route. So if you know someone, or if you are someone who could give a talk about this side of cybersecurity, then please reach out to me because I will be very happy to line you up for the September edition. Last but not least, if this webinar series sparks your interest and you wish to discuss your ideas with us, then please feel free to get in touch with Annemieke Los. She's our CCO, and you can reach her through the email address shown on this slide, or through our website, or through LinkedIn. We hope to welcome you in one of our next webinars. Stay in touch and up to date by following our company LinkedIn page, or subscribing to our newsletter, or subscribing to our YouTube channel, where we are also live nowadays. So see you next time and enjoy your evening. That was it.